Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
business editor and columnist Greg Jefferson,
investigative reporter Brian Chasnoff.
And we're hoping to be joined soon by City Hall reporter Josh Vector. I think he's joining up with us. This is our snowpocalypse, snowmageddon, snowman's land episode of the Express. I think to give Josh credit, I think he described it as the rolling blackout edition of Puro Politics. This is the beginning of our rolling blackout review tour. And so
we're having editions now.
All right, Josh, you're there. That's great.
Yeah,
so we've had all kinds all kinds of power challenges. So we're gonna try to get through this podcast. And as you all know, this overnight, Sunday night to Monday, we had the worst snowstorm we've had in San Antonio in, I guess, 36 years, 4 to 5 inches of snow. Temperatures got down to about 9 degrees. Hope everybody's safe out there. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on in San Antonio politics. Just in the last few days, we hit the filing deadline for city council races. We've got 81 people running for the various city council seats, and I think 14 in the mayor's race. But all the action is really happening between former councilman Greg Brockhouse and the incumbent Ron Nirenberg. Josh, you've been covering this. I mean, what's going on? How do you think this race is going to take shape? What are the big messages that we're going to hear from both of these candidates?
So, I mean, with the mayor, he's going to run on, we've done a good job on the pandemic response. We're sort of chugging along on sort of economic recovery. We're putting money into small businesses and small business grants and rental assistance. Look to him to sort of tout the workforce development initiative passing in November as sort of key to sort of the city's long-term economic recovery.
Right.
But he's also coming out and basically pointing to look, we've had gains in manufacturing jobs locally, where we're making progress on, my housing agenda, for example. Right. So he's basically saying, I've got 3 years to sort of run on.
If you can hang on a second, we're going to listen to a little clip from the mayor's campaign kickoff, which was a week before last, and to hear a little bit of that message.
In the wake of this pandemic, we have been fighting hard for families, and each and every one of you is responsible for our city's first ever voter-approved workforce development program, which will ensure that tens of thousands of families have a better chance to thrive in the city we call home. I know we're going to get San Antonio back on its feet, and it's going to take all of us to do that.
So obviously, Greg Brockhouse does not agree with the rosy assessment that Mayor Nirenberg has about how the city is getting through the pandemic and how we're moving forward economically. What is he saying?
He's kind of we've heard this argument throughout the pandemic that the city's kind of not being aggressive enough in terms of small business relief. For example, that the mayor is too focused on sort of long-term recovery efforts as opposed to sort of short-term assistance. Brockhouse put out this jobs platform last week, and they're full of there's a sort of like this a series of lofty ideas that he's throwing out there. One, to build an entire new airport from scratch. Basically, getting the city's lobbyists to be more involved in legalization of marijuana and gambling at the state level.
Right, so are these the short-term fixes he's talking about?
I was going to say, I think that cannabis thing, people have been working on that one for quite a while, haven't they?
But then also,
I mean, you can't go to Home Depot to buy an airport. I mean, that takes a while.
Then the thing that you wrote about, Gilbert, and was the fact that he wants to tap the city reserves to basically fund loans to small businesses. Which is not something that's recommended by city officials.
Sure.
They tend to say, hey, that'll damage our our bond rating. This will damage our ability to basically borrow for all, all sorts of sort of capital costs. And also that, hey, we're also going to, if we have an emergency, we need that money in case there's an emergency. Yeah.
And Greg, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, get your business expertise, because he's saying, well, it's a rainy day fund. And this is, if ever there's a rainy day, this is that time. But I think the city has perceived this reserve not simply as a rainy day fund, but as a kind of a show of fiscal, just stability, which has helped to keep their.
Well, I mean,
is that fair?
Yeah, it is fair. But I mean, you have to keep in mind that the reserve fund was in just abysmal shape when Cheryl Scully became the city manager in 2005. Right. To her credit, I mean, she built it up, and within 3 years, the city had a AAA bond rating. The problem is it's become like this. It's become this fetish for city officials. And the idea that you dip into this fund under any circumstance is just, to a lot of people at City Hall, just unthinkable. Mm-hmm. But I do actually believe that Brockhouse has a point. This is not sacrosanct. I mean, this is an emergency. It's not unreasonable to at least discuss tapping the fund, whether it's for a loan program or some other kind of expenditure that would help, people who have been thrown out of work. Right. I don't know, but I do think that, talking about dipping into the fund shouldn't be just off the table. I mean, it should be something, we can discuss and feel okay doing it.
Yeah. Let's listen to a little bit of what Greg Brockhouse's message was when he had his campaign kickoff.
Here is where we are right now as a city. Over 150,000 jobs lost. Devastation to our restaurants, our bars, our tourism industry upended. A mayor that hasn't lifted a single finger and doesn't deem those employees worth saving. Ron Nirenberg has been picking business winners and losers this entire pandemic. Folks, that's called pandemic politics. It is not his job to pick who wins and who loses.
And Josh, I mean, it seems like he's kind of making the argument not only that Nirenberg has been sort of unsympathetic to the plight of small business people, but that there's been sort of an arbitrary sort of implementation of the COVID restrictions. He talks a lot about how we allowed 11,000 people to go and attend a boxing match at the Alamo Dome, but small businesses have had to face all kinds of restrictions. I mean, how do you think this is going to play?
Well, I think it's pretty interesting. You have, you're starting to see, say, like restaurateurs start to be a little bit more public about their dissatisfaction with Nirenberg on this front. Just looking at it, I think people would be sympathetic to that message that, hey, look, like you're seeing small businesses, have to abide by these restrictions, which, by the way, at this point are imposed by the state, not by the city or the county. But I think people are going to see that sort of what they'll see as hypocrisy between, the city, still holding these massive events while still, telling people to shelter in place and telling people, not to gather with their families over the winter holidays, for example. Mm-hmm. But something I wanted to mention before we get too far away from it is that in terms of Nirenberg's approach to this, he's pretty much not acknowledging Brockhouse at this point. He's trying to not engage with him directly.
Says he's not going to debate.
Says he's not going to debate. But also, he's offered some version of this quote to many media outlets, saying basically, like, I'm not going to engage in sort of horse race politics with Brockhouse. I mean, or without naming Brockhouse. So, I mean, like, they're basically, sitting on this notion that, the pandemic has strengthened him, and that there's really no need to engage with Brockhouse at this point.
Isn't it interesting? I mean, you have to remember that Brockhouse got within 2.2 percentage points of him in that runoff 2 years ago. And I think it'd be a mistake, regardless of whether it's politically advantageous for the mayor. I think it's a mistake to not have any debates. I think that we've had some cycles when we've had too many. And sometimes we have, all the candidates in there and it can be really difficult, but I think there should be some exchange between these candidates. And I mean, when Nirenberg ran in 2017 as a challenger, then Mayor Ivy Taylor, she was seeking her third term. Her first term had been by appointment, but it was her third term that she was seeking. And she did about 40 debates, as I remember, with him. And I think that, I don't necessarily think he owes it to Brockhouse, his opponent, but I think he owes it to the voters of San Antonio to be able to, as Greg said, the issue of the fund, reserve fund. I mean, this is something that there should be a really robust debate about. I think there also should be a debate about the next thing I want to bring up, which is the Fix SAPD issue. We've talked a lot about the organization Fix SAPD, which has had a petition drive to get a repeal initiative, an initiative that would repeal collective bargaining for the police union. They were able to get that on the ballot, and it's really interesting because Brockhouse has said he's going to devote a lot of time to campaigning against it. He thinks it's bad for the city and for public safety. And to my knowledge, Nirenberg is kind of staying out of that issue altogether. Is that your sense, Josh?
Yeah, he's very eager to sort of not take a position on it. There's this sense going. I've heard that basically, the city attorney Andy Segovia told the mayor and city council members that they're not supposed to take a position on it publicly. Nevertheless, Manny Pelaez came out against it. But the mayor has not taken a position on it. He's basically said, any issues that we have with the contract, we can work out at the bargaining table.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how realistic that is in a campaign, though. I mean, I could completely see Ron Nirenberg trying to not say anything about the contract as the campaign progresses. I just think at some point he's going to have to respond, because I think this is something Brockhouse is likely to amp up. I mean, this issue has the potential to be probably the most racially and ethnically divisive part of any of this campaign. And if this campaign is going to play out that way, it's going to be because of Fix SAPD. And at some point, Nirenberg is going to have to respond. He's going to have to stake out a public position. You can't hide behind, we can work this out at the bargaining table. Yeah.
And Brockhouse is basically making the case that while this is really about collective bargaining, he's saying this will have the effect of defunding the police. I mean, it's certainly questionable argument, but it's one that could be effective for him. And I just think that I think the mayor has to weigh in, whether he thinks that repealing collective bargaining is the best approach or not. I mean, when we start hearing this being described as a defund the police effort, I think the mayor at some point has to weigh in on some level on that issue.
Mm. Yeah, and I think the police union are going to be hand in glove with Brockhouse on this issue in this campaign. Yeah, and that's a big amplifier. It is going to be a huge issue in this race.
And Brockhouse is also, he's counting on the sort of the pro police vote on the Fix SAPD matter to sort of put him over the line as well. So I mean, that's just further illustrates that hand in hand approach.
Yeah, Brian, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this. What's been one of the biggest stories in San Antonio recently, and I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about it. Martin Phipps, who is one of the most prominent attorneys in San Antonio, his firm, Phipps Mays, has been the lead firm in dealing with the county's opioid lawsuit. And recently, he had several members of his people who worked at the firm resigning, and including his partner T.J. Mays. And last week, Martin Phipps was arrested on suspicion of telephone harassment. What is going on with that story, and what do people need to know about it?
Well, my power is probably going to go out in about 5 minutes. So this is the rolling blackout friendly version of this story. It's going to be hard to boil down, but so there's basically two main players: Martin Phipps, the attorney, the lead attorney in this opioid litigation, and then TJ Mays, his former law partner. Mays resigned from the firm in January, and so to understand the story in the opioid litigation, Phipps designated experts, and one of them was Dr. Brian Alsip. He's the chief medical officer at University Health. Right. And, central, there's two things that are central to understand. First of all, there was an expert report that was written purportedly not by Dr. Alsip, but a summary of his opinions that he would testify to. And it was submitted to opposing counsel in the case, but it was without any input from Dr. Alsip. And so the Phipps law firm submitted this. It really upset Dr. Alsip and University Health officials. Alsip went so far as to to retain an attorney in the matter. So this was something. Bexar County Judge Nelson Wolf said that the Phipps law firm screwed this up. This was back in August. Now TJ Mays comes in because he was at the firm at that time, and at the same time that TJ was at the firm working on the opioid litigation, he was also a board member of University Health. Nelson Wolf actually appointed him to the board. So the story kind of took a look at that conflict of interest there. TJ had a lot of explanations about what he did or didn't do related to the expert opinion of Alsip. He says, he did his best to put up a wall and not stumble in any conflicts of interest. But the story does identify some instances in which TJ Mays did, in fact, contact Dr. Alsip while he was on the board, and after all this blew up with Alsip and his attorney, TJ sent Alsip's attorney some exhibits that were related to the expert opinion that Dr. Alsip had no input into. If any of that makes sense.
Yeah, and Mays ended up leaving the board, isn't that right? The University Health Board.
Judge Wolf actually asked him to resign from the board before he left the firm. This happened in November of 2020. So Mays resigned from the board and the firm.
And there's so many different angles to the story, but I mean, one of them, one that could definitely affect the people in this community, is that you had both the Mays Phipps law firm and the law firm run by Michael Watts working on this opioid lawsuit. And there was some conflict, I think, between Phipps Mays and the Watts firm over strategy. The Watts firm, I think, had shown more of an inclination to settle, and I think what I was hearing from the Phipps Mays firm a couple of months ago was that they were in disagreement with that, and they felt that this case needed to proceed, and that there was the potential to get a lot more.
That's correct. No, you're exactly right. And whatever their differences are, because of all this, Wolf last month effectively handed the reins to Michael Watts. Yeah. And the county commissioners are going to meet either this coming week or the week after to talk about Phipps's role in the case moving forward. And there's just been a lot of controversy surrounding the Phipps law firm, especially with TJ Mays going on a scorched earth campaign against his former employer. Yeah.
Well, we got a lot more, I think, that we're going to be hearing about that going forward. I'm glad that I think we got through this. You all have no idea how difficult it was to get everybody together with the rolling blackout situation that we've been dealing with today. But we hope everything's going well for you all who are listening, and hope everyone's staying safe. And we'll be back with you next week. Take care.